I'm going to try something different for a video. And it's going to be called Conker Rants. I might do these, at random at certain times if people like them. Because I can definitely go on for hours talking about retro video game topics on stream. And I was like, well, maybe I should just try my hand at doing a simple video. And maybe they'll evolve and become a little bit more, better production over time with a microphone and stuff once I get to that point. But for now, I just wanted to try this. This is something new, and hope you guys like it. So for this rant, I want to talk about video game consoles. Specifically, one console. I want to talk about a console I could go on about forever, and that is the Sega Genesis. It is not my first console that I had when I was a kid. My first console I had when I was a kid was the NES. I had an NES for a really long time. I still remember getting Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt and all that, and I enjoyed all that when I was a kid. I was born in 1990, so I was definitely late to the NES party, as well as the Sega Genesis party. But all that being said, I was an only child, so I never got hand-me-downs or anything like that. When I got an NES, I'd played it for, maybe a couple years, and I have two good stories that led to me getting a Sega Genesis. One story was, I used to go with my mother, all kinds of places when I was a kid. I spent a lot of time with my mother. She's like one of my best friends as a kid, especially at that age, of course, right? She's not going to leave you home alone or anything like that. And so whatever. She had a friend that owned a comic book store locally where I live. And I'm pretty sure he still owns the same comic book store. It still exists. That's besides the point. We used to go over to his house all the time. And they would just sit down and have a coffee and chat. They're friends, whatever. And I remember I used to, hang around for a little bit. But he always had video games and comic book stuff, which is partly why I became a nerd to begin with. I remember playing Sega Genesis for the first time at his house, and I think the game that I played was Altered Beast. I could be wrong. It's very fuzzy memory because I had to be quite young at that point, probably like 4 or 5. So that it might have been like 1994, I guess you could say. And I remember thinking it was really great. Like, I still love my NES. I wasn't really that interested in getting a Sega Genesis at that point because it was like, Altered Beast, if you go back and play it, like, is one of those games. Still great, but, it's not like leagues ahead of anything. At that point, I was pretty amazed by it anyways. About a few weeks later, coincidentally, it's funny how this worked out, I got pneumonia as a kid. And it was a severe case. I was in hospital for a little over a week, I think. And back then, they didn't have TVs just in hospital rooms here in Canada. You had to, rent. I think now they have the TVs in there and you can just pay to have them connected, basically. But anyways, so I remember we rented a CRT for me, my mother did, and a Sega Genesis. And renting it, I think it came with just one game to play. And that was Sonic the Hedgehog 2. So, the first time I put in Sonic the Hedgehog 2, I remember, the speed of that game, especially over the first one, which I hadn't played. The speed in the second game compared to, anything on the NES was crazy. I remember when I was a kid being completely mind-blown, 4 or 5 years old. Going from Mario Brothers, original Mario Brothers or Mario Brothers 3 even, to Sonic the Hedgehog 2 as a kid was mind-blowing for me. And I had seen the Super Nintendo, and I had wanted it up until that point. And I think that was a turning point for me, and where I became a Sega fan more. I remember that Christmas, me and my best friend across the street, he asked for a Super Nintendo, and I asked for a Sega Genesis. That way we could play every single game that came out, and we wouldn't be missing out on anything. And that's pretty much what happened. I remember Christmas, before Christmas came around, I went with my mother to a local game store, and she got me a Sega Genesis. Obviously, it was secondhand at that point because Sega Genesis had been out since '89, right? This was 94, 95. And I got to pick out 3 games and get a console. It was a Model 2 Sega Genesis, which, if you don't know, is like the smaller one that came out later on. Most considered to be not as good as the original console. But I got that, and I picked out 3 games. Sorry, camera died. It was 3 games that I had. I picked out Sonic 1, because I wanted the first game. The second game, which is the first game I played, which is obviously why I wanted it. And the other one was Back to the Future 3, which is a notoriously bad game. I didn't know at the time, all you had was magazines and stuff back then. There was no internet for that kind of stuff. But that being said, I had those 3 games. I remember staring at like the clamshell cases because they were all in box. Right up until Christmas. It must have been months, probably October till December or something like that. And when Christmas came around, I got my Sega Genesis, which was a Model 2. And I remember the first one I wanted to play was Back to the Future because I was so excited. I loved Back to the Future movies when I was a kid and Ghostbusters and all that. But I put in Back to the Future 3, and man, was that disappointing. It was so disappointing. I was still glad I had Sonic 2 and Sonic 1. But literally the next week, I traded in Back to the Future 2. Like, you could trade your games for other games at this video game shop. And I had went back and traded in Back to the Future 3 for Dick Tracy. And Dick Tracy is an amazing Sega Genesis game. Highly underrated. And, I mean, from then on, that was it for me. I can't say, Sega Genesis to me is, one of the greatest consoles of all time. It has a great library. You can tell I love it. Behind me is literally just Sega Genesis and 32X and whatnot. And there's a whole shelf over here of loose cartridges as well that I don't have cases for. Just a great 16-bit console. And, I mean, it gave Nintendo a crazy run for its money. I'm not going to go into, the crazy history of it or anything like that. That's not what these videos are about for me. If you want a history of Sega Genesis, there's a million YouTubers doing that. I just want to give my personal experience with these consoles and maybe say a few things about them and stuff like that. I have a box model one right here. And, such a good console. Seriously. I can't say enough good things about it. It literally blew my mind when I was a kid, and that was in 1994 or 5, which was late into this console's life cycle. I mean, the Saturn was just around the corner, and we all know how that went. So many good games. I guess I could just give a few recommendations for games. Shinobi 3 is an amazing game. Revenge of Shinobi. They're both masterpiece games. All the Sonic games are good on it. Even Sonic 3D Blast and Spinball, even though people like to say they're trash. They're really not that bad. Ghostbusters is amazing on it. Dick Tracy's amazing on it. I'm just trying to think of a few games. There's a million games for it. There's so many games for it, and they're all so good. And I've always been a retro gamer. I have new consoles and stuff, but I always come back to this console more than anything. I collect everything. You can see PlayStation over here and PSP and whatnot. There's more than that. But Sega Genesis is the one collection that I don't think I'd ever get rid of until, way late in life. If I had to for some reason or something like that. It's just, I always come back to it, I got my Sega Genesis CD, 32X, whatever, and I love the console. And that's my history with this console. That's what I grew up with. It's not the first console I ever had, like I said, but it's the first console that I ever actively really wanted, really badly, an NES was kind of I want it, all my friends have one, I want one. And this was one that was man, I gotta have a Sega Genesis. I gotta be that kid on the block that had it, and I was. And I was proud of it then, and I'm proud of this console now. It's a great console. Anybody who is younger in age that wants to get into retro games, I highly recommend getting one. Or just get a Genesis Mini if, you know, you don't have a lot of money and you want to just experience some of the games. They're not hard to find. It's definitely worth it. It's hard to recommend original consoles nowadays with, you know, hardware aging and stuff like that. But yeah, I hope you guys liked the video. If this video gets enough likes, I don't know how many, I'm not going to give you a number or anything. I'll probably do another one. Because I can go on about all the consoles. Maybe I'll just go through ones that I have personal experiences with a lot. And that's pretty much what these videos are going to be. Anyways, thanks. If you liked the video, please like, hit subscribe. I really appreciate it. We do gameplay. I also stream on Twitch, ConkerChimera. That's my main source of stuff I do on the internet. And YouTube's kind of a secondary thing for me. But I wanted to get into doing videos. So I hope you like it. Like, subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out. Bye-bye!